11th of 1888, a woman named Martha Tabram was stabbed 39 times in Whitechapel, a working-class community in London. Tabram was mistaken for a sleeping drunk by at least one person before someone walked by and saw blood on August 8th and thought, oh, hey, maybe we should do something. Her death was considered unremarkable by the press. Her story was marginal, buried on the final page of the Illustrated Police News on August 11th and given a scant 3 inches beneath 6 inches of the alleged frauds upon tradesmen. Judith Flanders marks that the Daily News even goes so far as to report Tabram's death as a supposed murder in Whitechapel, despite the violence that she clearly suffered. She was stabbed 39 times. By bearing news of her death in the later pages, papers like Police News have remarked on the cultural value of her story. Her death offers no great impact on the community at large, but may be of passing interest. Tabram's headline is a useful mechanism to draw attention to pages which offer advertising revenue to the paper, but they deemed a dead prostitute unlikely to sell papers if presented on the front page. This is the normal state of the penny paper in the summer of 1888, published weekly for a class of readers who could not afford a daily newspaper in a culture that consumed the printed word at an extraordinary rate. Tabram's death is a mystery, but hers is not yet a good story, and thus had no impact on the material structure of the paper. Her report fit on page 4 of Police News, and so there she went. But before long, she's connected to something larger, and by September 8th and Jack the Ripper's second canonical kill, the case would be reported on the front page across the country and beyond. So in the fall of 1888, the murders of women in Whitechapel caught public attention for their savagery and the dawning realization that these murders were likely the work of a single, unknown, and unpredictable madman. Individually, the deaths of these women were not extraordinary in a journalistic sense. Violence was a regular exchange traded in British newspapers, but collectively they became a media sensation. Lucy Worsley writes, the British enjoyed and consumed the idea of murder. The coverage of the brutal attacks on prostitutes in Whitechapel demonstrated the growing profitability of crime reporting throughout the 19th century. Although Jack the Ripper is not England's first serial killer, or even the only one to target this particular class, he is extraordinary for the media sensation he inspired, and the influence that Ripper reporting had on penny papers. Even in the midst of the terror, the murderer became an object of curious fascination, and in the absence of viable suspects, the Ripper was developed by periodicals, who printed rumor and conjecture as much as supported facts, and even offered portraits of a person seen only by his victims. But as journalists gave shape to the looming figure of the Ripper, the reporting of his crimes and the subsequent investigations directly impacted the material structure of penny newspapers. Ripper reporting inspired shifts in column presentation, changes in the content and role of illustration, and impacted the rhetoric of newspaper advertising. A penny dreadful based on the Whitechapel murders was even written, published, and circulated while the murders were still being committed. For the reading public, the Ripper slayings were a source of entertainment, in no small part because the murderer was targeting an unprotected, degraded, and dehumanized class, women who were believed to have been prostitutes. One contemporary reporter even disgustingly went so far as to suggest that these women were better off dead. There were no eyewitnesses to the Whitechapel murders, and the murder remains unknown to this day. No one knows the attacker's age, sex, race, occupation, education, class, motivation, or even the number of people involved. Educated and uneducated guesses were made, and a couple of suspects were tried on from sides, from a mysterious leather apron to actor Richard Mansfield, whose only crimes being too good of an actor in the production of Jekyll and Hyde that was playing in London at the time. But like, if he's that good, he must be the Ripper. Alan Moore has upped the conspiracy theory and offered Queen Victoria's physician operating as a member of the Illuminati. But no one knows. Jack the Ripper isn't real. The figure we think of is a fiction created by newspapers. In the absence of testimony and reliable fact, penny papers had a field day with the sensation that was the Whitechapel slayings. They are even responsible for the lasting moniker of the killer, a journalist faking the famous letter sent to the police and signed Jack the Ripper. That wasn't real. But the monster they created slowly crept through their papers, saturating pages with Whitechapel stories. Other headlines became smaller, advertising space increased, but the length of the paper remained the same, which meant something had to go. That something could have been another Martha Tabram, someone whose story was considered insignificant compared to the major headline of the day. Jack the Ripper isn't real, but the women now known only as his victims were.